Hey everybody, and welcome back to the gradient mesh tutorial. This is episode 22. We are going to start drawing, at least last time we left off finishing the left eye, or the right eye depending on how you want to talk about it, but it is going to be this eye right here. And if you think this is the image, you are wrong, because right now, just to trick the audience that is tuning into right now, my drawing is currently active and on. This is all vector. You can even see right here. And my nose layer is also turned on. So if you were fooled, that just proves what we're trying to do here. So we're gonna go right into making the right eye of the drawing. Let me turn on my layers and see what we got right now. So this is what we have right now. And as you can see, it's looking fairly smooth and very nice right now. Obviously, besides with the missing detail, the detail that we have looks pretty realistic. And when we keep going, it's only going to look better and better and better from here. So I'm really excited to see where the drawing kind of leads up and turns out to look like, because on this rate I feel like we're going to have a really nice finished piece. Alright, so the beginning of making the new eye. So if you're just watching now, if you haven't watched my other eye drawing, which I'm talking about is this eye, I'd recommend watching that one maybe before you watch this one, because I'm going to be a little bit more loose with the tutorial on this particular eye. I do advise you go back and watch this if you're really trying to learn how to draw the eye, but we're going to continue on to the second one. And it's going to be pretty much the same process as everything else. It's going to be the same exact process as this eye. We're going to just transfer that idea into this, and I pretty much, again, already, like, the idea is you're already setting yourself up for this in the future. So when you draw the face background layer, which is this layer, that is going to be pretty much the layer that is going to determine the rest of your meshes and the other layers. So if you're not thinking about the shapes of your layers in the future, then you're really not going to have a lot of success with the main background face layer. Because as you can see with this eye, I've already shaped my kind of like my makeup part of her eye, like this little bean shape that she's got going on over here in her eye socket. You can see that this is a shape that I have already created. So now what I can do is I can basically take that form that I've saw before. So if you look at our original picture, you can clearly see the drawing that I've done over there with the makeup, the shape. So we're just gonna do the same shape as that basically, but I'm still gonna look at the image just to basically just to redo it, make sure I can double check my work and blend on the exact spot, because this layer is going to be a lot more accurate than my background face layer. And that is really, just like this one, that's really going to determine the real color that is supposed to be there. My previous face layer, if I hide this eye layer, it's kind of just reference. It's just there to be there. It's not really clean, disorganized, and this looks a lot nicer. Look at this highlight. Look how smooth that highlight is. Anyway, so let's get right into it. So I'm gonna hide this layer, and I'm just gonna rename these layers because they're not gonna really make sense anymore. I'm just gonna name this layer the left eye, even though it is the right eye, yes. But just because it is a flat image, I'm just gonna be looking at it only at the left always. So I'm just gonna name it left eye layer 1, and then I'm gonna do the same, just so I know, because I'm gonna do the same for right. Just gonna make a new layer, and we're gonna do right eye layer 1. Okay, so now we have our layer set up for this eye. And like always with gradient mesh, we're going to start with a white square. We're just going to make it a square or rectangle. Get rid of the stroke, never have a stroke, leave it blank white. We leave it white, although we can have it another color, we don't want that to be the main flat color of our mesh, because it's kind of hard to see gray if we colored it or not. If you see a white dot that you have not colored, it's very easy to determine that you need to place color if you missed the spot. Just in general, everything's going to work better with white. Keep it white. So the idea is, again, we want to turn our square or rectangle to follow the trend of the shape. So because the face is running from like almost a 45-degree angle, if we imagine this, if we were looking straight on and then we turn the head, this is what the wireframe would look like. So you could see like that's what the framework would kind of surround, like, and how the lines would move and the geometry would move of the face in this directionality. So in this case, the eye runs kind of like on a 30-degree angle, so does the square now. That's gonna make our life a little bit easier. It's not gonna be a huge deal, but I'm just trying to get this idea into your head that we want to stay symmetrical to what we are drawing. So to start, we're gonna take our gradient mesh tool now. It's right here. Hit the center point of the square, and that's gonna create a nice symmetrical geometry to start out with. Now we can take our layer, we're gonna control click the eye so we can put it into outline mode, and we're gonna take our direct selection tool with the A key on the keyboard or up here. Then we're going to manually move these points to the boundary line of this color, where this color kind of shapes into this makeup, because that is what my boundary that I've decided from the beginning with the face layer. And I can be a little loose with the edges. It just has to be about, about what I'm trying to capture here with the makeup. So as you can see, I kind of have this light tan skin color that kind of travels all the way down, but then I have this divide here. I have this dark orange, and then I have the pink and the purple start to come in right about here, and then my dark orange here, my shade, and then a highlight. So that's kind of my boundary line I'm following. I'm kind of just following that trend I see. And this is just what I see. If you want to make it slightly different, that's fine. Just acknowledge that you're not, if you're following me directly, then it's going to be maybe a little harder for you to see how to fix things if this is the first time. So pretty much I'm almost done here. Gonna follow the edge of the nose. So I just want to smoothen out these corners. I'm going to keep this point as close to the center point of this entire shape, I think, would be. So I think the center point would be kind of in the center of the eye, based on, the perspective of the way the face is sitting. So I think that's a decent spot to have our reference point sit. All right, so last time I started out with shaping other kind of details around this eye, but I'm actually going to start out with the fine detail first, so I can get that out of the way. So just like last time, I again would recommend watching this tutorial, but I'm going to quickly explain it while I'm doing it. But I need to box this color in now. If you're just generally confused about mesh, I would not say starting at this episode or starting at episode 22 would help. I would really advise to maybe skip around the entire tutorial and just get a general idea of what we're doing before we hop into maybe the middle of the entire tutorial. But again, if you're just trying to see a small segment of information, then I get it. But what we're gonna do is we're just gonna place a line at the center point of inside of the center of this shape, this dark shape here of the eye crevice, and then we're going to make sure this follows that path the whole time, or else we're gonna really just be defeating the purpose here. So this point, because it has to follow the center of this, I don't want it to go off the natural trend and go to the left. I want it to come all the way down and kind of follow that path naturally. And then we gotta adjust the points manually every time we make a point to stay true to the mesh that we have created in the first place, and the mesh that we were trying to make as well. So you can see what we just did there. And the same thing for this point. This one's gotta come all the way down, and we wanna fix these curves, these Bezier curve handles, so they're not gonna be within each other, or else it's gonna create a very harsh line in our gradient mesh. And then we are going to take this handle, shift it over. We're using the caret tool right now, which is under the pen tool. I'm gonna change my color here so we can see what we're doing. And I think that's looking pretty decent now. So that's gonna be the start of that shape. We have that on the line exactly. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my gradient mesh again, and I'm gonna add a point on the top edge of that, where that color ends, and then the bottom edge of where that color ends. So now we are kind of boxing in this shape, and when we fill color inside between these two lines, those top and bottom lines that we just added are going to bound our color from the center in and kind of create this fine, sharp detail with also a feathered edge, because this is a gradient mesh. This is not the pen tool. It's going to create feathered edges between the colors. It's going to create very smooth gradients between the lines every time. That's the idea. Color branches out in all four directions in gradient mesh smoothly. So you can see now what we're getting at. But that's not going to basically complete that shape. We still need to box in the edges here. So we're going to create a point at the edge of the end of the color. That's where I think it ends. And now we have to move these points to their designated homes, and we're going to create the shape that we see. And I'm going to make it almost like a rounded rectangle. I'm going to move this guy actually up, and then I'm just going to adjust the curve. Then I'm going to move this guy down, and then just adjust the curve, just so we get a little bit more straight transfer between this point and this point, like that. Alright, so we're going to do the other side now. And we're not going to focus on drawing these eyelashes right now. We're going to pretend that they're not there, and we're drawing under them. Alright, so now that's going to allow us to have the color properly fill into that section. And the last thing we need to do to make sure it also transitions nicely, because when we fill in this point, it's still going to be a pretty dark shade. So what we need to do is we need to box those in. So then we have a nice transition between the point that we're going to make right here, and then whatever point that is further in the distance in this center point, in this center pocket that we have here. So I'll show you right now. So we're going to box it in like that on top, and we're going to box it in like that on the bottom. So now we have a line running and keeping it all together like glue, just like that. We don't need to be too specific with these lines. They're going to be pretty generally colored later, but I'm using them as bounding boxes for my really important detail of the face. So that's looking pretty good. Now what I'm going to do, just like I just said, to show you, this color is going to box this color in, and then it's going to look pretty smooth but sharp right here. It's going to be a nice sharp transition. But now we don't really need a sharp transition above. We don't need to add this many lines all over the place. We want this area to be pretty smooth. It's not really, you know, it doesn't have a lot of texture other than the glitter. So then we're just going to add maybe a point kind of in the center like that to create a nice smoother transition. And you can see now the finer detail has more gradient mesh anchor point lines, and then the top where it's smoother will get less, and that's the idea. I'm just going to give a quick save so I don't lose whatever I'm doing, because I am video recording and drawing. We never know what's going to happen. And the next part of the eye is I'm going to define her upper eye socket. So what I have to do is I have to acknowledge the corner point and this line that is created right here. So you can see the line boundary of her eye, kind of like this. There's a one line that runs like this, and then there's one line that branches off and goes like this. And we do need these lines, and that kind of ends up right at the corner here. So I actually need a point right here. I need a point to sit there so I can run a line over that way, because I can't really put anything there, and I need to find a nice way to start it. So you can see that we have added a line right here, but I'm not going to pull this line, because this line is meant to be right next to this one. So if I start pulling this whole line down to make this line follow here, it's not going to work. I'm destroying what I've just created here. So now what I need to do is I just need to add another point. Maybe, you know, it could be here on this line, and it'll work out because it's going to add the same trend. And now I can take this line and I can now branch it off in the correct direction. Now I can take my carrot and then make this line follow that trend. I didn't want to destroy what I've created. Even though we could fix it later, I'm not really gonna backtrack and destroy what I've spent time creating. I'm going to just make what I need to make to continue. So I will follow this line soon, but right now, since this is what I'm making, I'm going to follow this trend, this kind of line here that I see, this imaginary line that defines the upper eye socket, eyelid. So I think that looks pretty good. Now, in order to make sure we see this area, we're going to kind of do something similar to what we just did in this little dark eye crevice. So we need a point in the middle here to define that trend of color, that shading in the center. We don't want it to be too sharp, but we don't want it to be too smooth either, because we are in a pretty confined area. And now, in order to really see this transition between light tone and dark tone on this line, we need a point here, and we're going to box in and create that fine line. and we want to make sure everywhere on the mesh is fixed. We want to fix it everywhere. Check every single anchor point that is created when you add a new point. It's going to add points all over the place, and we want to just be consistent with editing the entire time, or else it's going to become really overwhelming later when you go to color it. It's just going to be a lot of work at once, and it's going to be very hard to see almost what errors you've made if you don't do it one step at a time. I have a saving habit. I just saved again. Anyway, we're going to do the opposite side so we can box in and create a sharp line transition, because this dot is going to represent the brown, this dot represents the middle tone, and this dot represents the brighter pink at the top. And this line is going to follow that trend. And now see, this is a problem. We have to see what's going on here. It almost has to do that too. It almost has to come this sharp because we really need it to, that brown is gonna run. So look, I'll show you. So if I select this color and I fill it to this brown is gonna follow this line all the way down and become so sharp until it disappears right about here. And that's kind of what we almost need it to do. So I'm gonna leave it right, like basically like this, colliding, because I think that's gonna look actually pretty accurate. And we could fix it later if it isn't. All right, so now that we have that line, the next line I'm going to create is the bottom boundary to this line right here. And I'm going to do that by selecting a point and hitting it right there. This guy, let's see what I need to do with this one. Actually, I'm going to undo that because I can't see. If you ask me, it kind of branches off right here, the shading, and it goes like that. So I'm going to try and get it to work like that. I'm going to add a point right here, and then I do need another point right here because I need to pull this point down, and I'm going to like cup the color like that. Just going to smoothen out these lines because this is what I see. This is what I think what might look best. So I'm going to do something like that. And what I need to do, so this brown shading over here doesn't run down here because that's not really what it looks like, although it probably will be covered by my other eye layer that I'm going to create on top. I'm just going to add a point here to bound in and capture this black to bound in this brown. And I'm really not going to worry about what's going on over here. I just don't want the brown to be spreading all over the place. So that's what I got so far. And I'm sorry if you are particularly confused. I hope just watching can help you learn because there's only so much I could say verbiage wise when it comes to this. It's a lot of visualization and just repetition and doing it over and over again to get it. There's only so much I could say to help. All right, so now that we have the top line, we are going to just make sure the bottom line follows the, we're going to fix the bottom line here. So that's looking pretty decent. And I'm just going to add one point here. It's going to be covered by the other eye layer, but I'm just going to add one line here to create that idea of the sharp transition. And all these points here are going to be colored the same color. There's too many points right here to have a different shade. It's all a light, it's a light skin peach tan right there. So anytime you see like severely clustered points, unless you have specific intent for some points, usually I just cluster color them at like to one color. Like these two will get the same shade. These two will get the same shade. So I think the eyelid is it's going to be colored properly when I fill in the color. I think the mesh is looking pretty accurate at the moment when it comes to what we've drawn so far. So what I'm going to just do is go to the bottom now because I've already finished the top. I think I don't really need too many more points up here unless I, decide that otherwise later when I color it. I'm going to leave that right now. I'm going to leave this right here. Not going to worry about anything under this white or the pupil or anything in the center because that's going to be a separate layer that we're going to fill. And I'm going to go to the bottom of the eye. And because this point represents the boundary of the eye, now we have to create another point on there so we can go to the right and follow the bottom path. And the reason I don't pull this one down and these 2 points down to make the boundary like this is because that's our center point, and we don't want to make a new center point or really lose our center point either. I kind of want it to be there to define the shape of our mesh every time we add a point. It kind of creates consistency within the mesh. So I'm going to add a point right here. So now, because I have an extra line, I can now move these points down. I'm not going to worry too much about the specific shading right here, this black to, you know, this little kind of shard of black. That's going to be focused on my layer that goes on top. It's really fine and specific, and I don't want to add that many more points to this mesh when I could just do it on the other one. It's going to be a lot easier for me on the other one. Just want to see, we had a point overlapping there. Definitely want to make sure we're fixing that stuff. There's no reason for that point to be all the way over there. I want it to be a little bit more linear with the one that it follows up with. Same thing with this one. Okay, so we're just gonna keep going across the edge. And we have 2 shapes here. We have one that rides on top of here, and then we have one that branches down here and kind of cups the eyelashes. And we're gonna draw that on this layer. So because this eye kind of follows and goes up here, I can't really cross into here, but I'm gonna make this point go about to right there. And I just noticed a mistake on this edge. Gonna fix it right now. Okay, so now I'm going to draw the bottom line so I can box in this black. So we're just consistently doing this little box in technique that we kept talking about. It's very important that we keep this in mind. And we kind of have a little problem right here because I'm not gonna draw this part and I need to draw this part. So I need to really come up with a spot that this shape closes in. So I think this black line kind of follows this trend and then starts to get really sharp about right here. It gets lost about right over where my arrow is. So I'm gonna kind of draw what I see with the mesh. It's almost like using the pen tool, but you're not using the pen tool. You're just moving anchors to what you would draw without really the gradient mesh, and then it's going to resemble exactly what you're trying to go for. Hopefully when you're done with the mesh, it'll look like what you're trying to draw with the pen tool, but much smoother and maybe more realistic. So that's my shape, and you can see how I kind of created that shape here with the black, where that black goes. And now in order to make sure we see that shape as kind of a defined shape and tone area, in order to see that shape and define that shape, we're going to do exactly what we did before. We're going to put one on top so we can create a harsh line. Yes, I know I'm not going to see it in this case, but I just want to make sure this shape works. I'm going to add one in the middle, and that's going to be the main source for this shade and picking up that color when we go to fill in the mesh. And I'm going to add a point under, and that's going to create that nice sharp but feathered edge, that harsh divide between black and dark tan and skin tone. So you can see what we're building here. It really makes sense when you look at it. And same thing we did before with this point, kind of like with how smooth it goes here, because there's so much open space, it's going to be a lot more smooth than, let's say, over here where we're having a lot more defined change of color. We're going to do almost the same thing down here. But I just want to acknowledge just one more change of tone from the eye. We have an imaginary line going from here with the dark tan to light tan, kind of goes, maybe kind of closes out over here. But because this is gradient mesh, we don't have to be perfect. I'm going to just probably have the color run to about over here. And I'm going to add a point on this imaginary line. So I think this line runs about here to here to here. So I'm just going to add a point about right there, and then I'm going to adjust accordingly. And I think that's looking pretty accurate to the trend of color. So now what I could do is I can add a point in the middle to define that color, box in technique, and then I can add a point on the outside to define the other side of the color. And for this, on the other side, I don't want to get too smooth. I want there to be a smooth transition, in my opinion, particularly for this spot. So I'm just going to add one more point right in the middle like that. And I think the color just needs to be a little bit adjusted. I think it's running a little bit downward and then it kind of folds up. So I just want to make sure my lines are running in that direction, just like this. Kind of goes down and then back up. And this one kind of curls up like this. I'm not going to draw this shadow under her eye. I think that's going to make it look, it's going to age her a little bit, as well as I didn't draw it on the other side. So I'm just going to leave it. All right, so in my opinion, I think that's looking pretty sharp for our eye layer, base layer for the right eye. I might need to add more points later, but right now I think I'm far enough with this part to start filling in the color on this particular shape. So we're gonna jump right into coloring it on this episode and start out. If you're just tuning in now, we're gonna hit A on the keyboard to hit our direct selection tool, and then we're gonna hit I on the keyboard to hit our eyedropper. And now when we have these two selected back to back, if we hit control, right, if I hit direct selection and then hit the eyedropper, if I hit control, now we're easily switching with the control key back and forth between these. Push control down, select, let go, select, color. And it's really that easy when you have that little small technique really narrowed. It's really easy when you have that small technique down and you really know about it. I don't know if you knew about that, but hit the direct selection tool and then eyedropper, and then control is your best friend. Makes life a lot easier when doing this type of work, or else it's going to be very annoying constantly lifting your fingers and hitting A or I or moving the tool over, or you know what I mean. It's just I have one finger on control, one hand on the mouse, and that's all I need. I don't need to move any hands. I'm constantly just moving across the mesh really quickly. This is a very tedious process, so it's anything to take off the time load that this process takes makes me very happy. So let's get right to coloring. So I just want to add a few points now that I'm looking at the mesh before I go to continue finishing coloring, even though it's pretty much done. Just need a few more dots. But I'm just going to add a point here to box in the right side of the color of this shape. I'm going to put a shape in the middle so I can get a different tone of color in the middle of this line. And I'm going to put another point here. I'm not going to worry too much about the rest of the structure of these points. I'm just going to continue coloring with that. But I am going to manipulate the middle points that I'm looking to get a different color tone, such as this one and this one. Plus I needed these right points, the point on the right and the point on, I did the left one, I just needed the right. But yeah, I just needed this point on the right so I could box in this eye indent here. So now I notice just a little bit of a problem personally. I want a point in the middle here now because I don't really have enough detail between this point, which is probably going to be pretty dark or close to the tone of the eye crevice, and over here, which is a pretty light tone. And there's a dark tone that it transfers light all the way to dark here, so I'm not really getting any of that. properly, at least. So I'm just gonna add a point there, and I'm gonna basically just group color these points to one of these tones here. Let's see what I get. Just gonna fill in the color in the middle here just for blank. I don't really need it. So that's what we have pretty much. I don't know what's going on over here. I can already tell that I'm just gonna need one more point in here, so let me just fix this line. Alright, so that's pretty much what we have without even editing any color or blending any color or fixing the edges, and it already looks almost spot on, which is pretty awesome to see. But I'm really digging what I have created here with the little like eye indent. Let's check it out. Let's look at it one more time without the eye. Yeah, so almost like no change, I feel like. When it comes to this little dark eye crevice, like I feel like both mine and the realistic one look identical, which is awesome. I like what I've done with the pink tone in here. I'm going to add those actual dots there, but I actually kind of like the gradient mesh having the pink there. It really looks awesome. But for the most part, my color shapes and my directionality of all my colors is looking pretty good. I'd say maybe these lines maybe come down like this, just a little bit to let that shadow come down. Let's see. Yeah, definitely much nicer. But overall, I'd say pretty accurate. This part is definitely too dark. Yeah, it's looking awesome. I think in the next episode, I'm going to end it here. We're going to actually do a little bit of cleanup to the sharper, we're going to do a little bit of cleanup to the mesh we've just created, this one, such as like areas like this, or just areas that maybe need like a little touch up over here. But for the most part, I think we're looking pretty smooth, and we're only gonna have to do minimal work to make this mesh look that much better. So I'm really excited to see what comes next for this eye. The next step after the blending is going to be drawing the other eye layer, and then we're gonna go into adding all the important details on top of that to really make this eye pop just like this one. And then once we have that eye and we have this layer on and the nose layer, it's going to look so real, you're just not going to be able to wait to finish the entire drawing. And from normal viewing distance, really no one's going to be able to tell that this is a drawing. Well, thank you for watching through this episode. I hope you are enjoying what I'm putting out here. I'm hoping this tutorial is helping you in some form of way. My name is Mark DiMattei, and you can find me on Instagram at markd_arts. That's Marked Arts. Please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel and this video. Please let me know if I'm doing a bad job or if I'm doing a great job. I would love to hear back from anybody who's watching. I am human. Please message me. I will message back. But anyway, thank you guys for sticking it out, and I'll see you on the next one.